He was an out-of-work auto mechanic, looking for a bargain at the local mall, accompanied by his daughter, who only hoped for a pair of shoes that did not pinch her toes. Neither could guess that a sudden explosion would put them face to face with danger, or that in a moment of panic, he would risk his life to save a child he had never met. Even more surprising was the secret behind that little girl, a secret that would change his life forever. Before we carry on, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit the subscribe button for something special tomorrow. Now, let us return to that crowded mall, to the swirl of holiday shoppers, and the improbable twist of fate that bound a struggling father's destiny to a billionaire's family. The day dawned gray and cool, a hint of winter clinging to the air. Jacob Blair, who had recently lost his steady job at a small auto repair shop, woke in his cramped one-bedroom apartment with a sense of restless unease. He lay on the worn-out couch in the main living area, blinking up at the water-stained ceiling. Sleep had barely come the night before, a cascade of worries about unpaid bills and looming rent pinning him awake. Across the room, in the alcove meant to serve as the dining area, 12-year-old Ava slept curled beneath a thin blanket, her small frame an all-too-constant reminder of Jacob's responsibility. He knew she was almost too tall for that makeshift bed, but there was nowhere else in the apartment to set up a proper bedroom for her. Times had been rougher than ever, since the auto shop where he had worked shut its doors with hardly a day's warning. He had to accept the only place he could afford at the time, which was this dingy apartment with peeling wallpaper and an unreliable heating system. Jacob rolled to the side, ignoring the groan of his stiff back, and rose quietly so he would not wake his daughter just yet. The sun had barely climbed over the neighboring brick buildings. He padded into the tiny kitchenette, searching for the last of the coffee grounds. He tapped out what little remained, enough to brew a sad, watery cup. As he waited for the lukewarm water to trickle through the old drip machine, he glanced down at a battered stack of bills on the counter. Electric, phone, rent, medical expenses for Ava's occasional doctor visits. He was behind on all of them. Day labor gigs were unpredictable, and it had been a while since his last one. He had tried handing out resumes at half a dozen auto shops, hardware stores, even large chain retailers, but nobody seemed to be hiring. His references were good, but his luck was not. He sighed and sipped the weak coffee, grimacing at the taste. Ava stirred in her makeshift bed, rustling the blanket and opening her hazel eyes. She yawned quietly, trying to mask the fatigue that came from sleeping in a cramped corner. Jacob felt a twinge of guilt, wishing he could provide her with a real bedroom, a soft bed, and a space she could call her own. That had been his plan after her mother's passing 5 years ago, to give Ava some semblance of normal life, but each twist of fate had set them further back. Now, here he was, a father on the verge of desperation, watching his daughter force a hopeful smile. "Morning, Daddy," she said softly, her voice carrying no hint of complaint. Ava's optimism always shone through, even when the paint was chipping off the walls around her. He tried to smile back. "Morning, Pumpkin. I thought maybe we'd head to that thrift shop in the mall today. You said your shoes were too tight." Her eyes flickered to the worn sneakers near the door. The soles were separating at the edges, a fact she tried to hide by applying glue. She nodded slowly. "They hurt a little, but we don't have to go if you don't have." He waved his hand to silence her protest. "No, we'll go, but see if we can find something second-hand, but in decent shape." Ava did not argue. She understood the constraints of their budget better than most kids her age. Instead, she rose from beneath the blanket and folded it neatly, slipping past him into the bathroom to wash up. Jacob watched her with a pang of mixed pride and sorrow, marveling at how she never complained about their circumstances. She adapted, day after day, never blaming him for the cramped apartment or the many times they had to make do with minimal groceries. While Ava got ready, Jacob checked his wallet, finding only a few wrinkled bills and some loose coins. They would have to stretch that amount for bus fare to the mall and a cheap pair of shoes. He mentally calculated how many bills were overdue and forced himself to take a steady breath. They were not visiting the fancy part of the mall anyway. They would be heading straight to the thrift store tucked into one corner by the food court. He was hoping for some clearance deals. Half an hour later, They stood at the bus stop. The November wind bit at their faces, making Ava tuck her chin into her thin scarf. Jacob draped an arm around her shoulders to provide a bit of extra warmth. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes, rattling to a stop, and they boarded, ignoring the faint odor of exhaust and stale hair. The ride took them through the city's aging district, past once flourishing shops now boarded up or sporting sale signs, until they finally reached the expansive parking lot of Jefferson Mall. Jefferson Mall was not the city's most upscale shopping center, but it was popular, thanks to a variety of discount clothing stores and a few mid-range dining options. On weekends, it drew families looking for affordable entertainment. The decor inside was dated, with scuffed floor tiles and chipped paint on the pillars, but it still bustled with energy. Jacob and Ava stepped through the sliding glass doors into the main atrium, greeted by the bright glow of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of frying dough from a pretzel kiosk. A small holiday display was under construction near the entrance, with plastic reindeer and half-strung garlands waiting to be properly arranged. Ava craned her neck, taking in the crowds. "Looks busy today," she noted, a slight twinge of nervousness in her voice. She had never been one for massive crowds, having grown used to quieter settings. Jacob gave her a reassuring pat on the back. "We'll make it quick. Just a pair of shoes, maybe something else if it's really cheap. Then we'll go." They walked past several shops, offering big discounts, though it was all still out of their price range. Ava paused briefly in front of a window display featuring a warm winter coat on a mannequin. She did not say anything, but Jacob noticed the way she glanced from her thin jacket to that thick, cozy coat. He felt his chest tighten, wishing he could buy it for her. Money was just too tight right now. He murmured a gentle maybe next time, and she nodded, forcing a small smile. They continued toward the thrift store, weaving through clusters of shoppers. Jacob's gaze darted over the bright signs. Sale, 50% off, limited time offer, and clearance rack. In the background, a distant hum of conversation filled the air, mingling with the echo of footsteps on the tiled floor. As they neared the food court, Jacob smelled the distinct aromas of fried chicken, sweet teriyaki sauce, and waffle fries. Ava's stomach growled softly, though she quickly tried to hide it. They had eaten a light breakfast thin hope meal made from the last packet they had left. Jacob made a mental note to see if they had enough money left for a small snack to share. The thrift store entrance was tucked beside a jewelry repair kiosk. Inside, fluorescent bulbs flickered overhead, revealing racks of used clothes, shelves of worn books, and a bin of miscellaneous shoes. A middle-aged clerk with tired eyes greeted them with a mechanical welcome, then returned to restocking items. Jacob and Ava picked their way through the store, scanning for footwear in Ava's size. It took some digging, but they eventually unearthed a pair of sneakers that were only moderately scuffed. Ava slipped them on, wiggling her toes. She gave her father a faint nod. "These feel good," she said softly, her relief apparent. The price was reasonable, still a pinch on Jacob's wallet, but at least it would not completely break the bank. He let out a quiet sigh, thankful they had found something in her size that did not look like it was about to fall apart. She left the store with the new sneakers on her feet, the old ones in a plastic bag. They stepped back into the mall corridors, which felt slightly warmer. Ava thanked him, her voice full of gratitude that tugged at Jacob's heart. He wanted more for her. He wanted to find a real job again, to secure a proper home, and to bring stability into her life. As they walked, he spotted a small bakery stand selling soft pretzels for a modest price. Glancing at the coins in his pocket, he decided to treat her. They joined the short line, the smell of fresh dough teasing their senses, and soon he was handing Ava a warm pretzel coated in cinnamon sugar. She beamed, nibbling delicately so she could savor it. Jacob took a deep breath, willing himself to cling to any sense of optimism he could. He needed to find a way to turn things around. Perhaps tomorrow he would try the industrial part of the city, see if any factory needed laborers. He glanced down at Ava, who was so focused on her treat that she did not notice the small group of teens behind them, giggling and scrolling on their phones. Ordinary moments like this made Jacob wish life would slow down, but fate had other plans. A deep rumble began in the distance. so low at first that Jacob almost did not register it as anything more than a passing truck outside. But the noise amplified in a split second, echoing through the mall corridor. Shouts of alarm rippled through the crowd. Ava looked up, her eyes wide, pretzel forgotten in her hand. Then came the bang, a muffled explosion that shook the floor under their feet. The overhead lights flickered, and Jacob automatically reached for Ava, gripping her hand. Panic erupted across the mall as people screamed, turning to see a plume of smoke rising from somewhere near the food court. Security gates rattled as some stores scrambled to shut their entrances. The crowd surged in confusion, bodies pressing in all directions as everyone tried to figure out where to go or how to escape. Jacob's heart thundered in his chest, fear coursing through his veins. He clutched Ava's hand tighter, scanning for an exit. Over the cacophony of terrified voices, the fire alarm blared, shrill and unrelenting. The strong smell of smoke stung his nostrils, and a haze began to creep along the ceiling. Someone nearby shouted that it was a gas explosion from one of the restaurants in the food court. Jacob's mind whirled with the realization that there might be a risk of further blasts if the gas lines were compromised. He turned to Ava. "We need to get out, now." She nodded, eyes wide with terror, her grip on his hand clammy. Together, they pushed through the crowd. People were running in every direction. Some were trying to flee, others searching for loved ones, and still others looked disoriented, not knowing where the main exits were. Jacob spotted a sign pointing to the emergency exit at the far end of the corridor, away from the food court. He began to pull Ava in that direction when he caught sight of something that froze him mid-step. A small girl, no older than 7 or 8, stood a few yards away, sobbing and calling out for her parents, tears streaking her face. Her hair was disheveled, and she clutched a tiny pink backpack. The crowd swept around her, nobody stopping, everyone too panicked to notice. Jacob felt a lurch in his chest. He glanced at Ava, who also looked distraught at seeing the child alone. He knew the right thing to do, though it meant endangering themselves. Without hesitation, he let go of Ava's hand, quickly instructing her, "Stay close to me. Do not lose sight of me." He darted toward the little girl. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, frozen in place like a deer caught in headlights. Smoke swirled overhead, and the acrid smell burned Jacob's throat. He crouched down to the child's level. Hey, are you okay? Where's your mom or dad?" he asked urgently, trying to keep his voice calm despite the chaotic environment. She stammered something about not knowing where they were, that she got pushed away by the crowd after the loud boom. Jacob held out his hand. "I'll help you find them. We need to get out of here, all right?" She hesitated, but seeing no other lifeline, she nodded and took his hand. Jacob beckoned for Ava to follow, and they guided the girl through the surging crowd. The sprinklers above had kicked in, showering them with water that mingled with the smoke. The floor became slick, and overhead lights began to flicker more violently, threatening to plunge the hallway into partial darkness. Shouts, cries, the blaring alarm, everything blended into one deafening roar. Jacob scanned for signs directing to an exit. He could barely see beyond 20 feet, the combination of sprinkler water and smoke making it difficult to navigate. His lungs ached from the effort of inhaling in such a polluted atmosphere. The little girl coughed, tears mixing with the water that soaked her hair, and she gripped Jacob's hand with trembling fingers. A rumbling noise overhead made him look up just in time to see part of the ceiling structure shift. A beam cracked ominously. People screamed, scattering in different directions, as a chunk of debris plummeted downward. Jacob acted on pure instinct. He pushed both Ava and the little girl out of the way, throwing himself over them as a makeshift shield. Pieces of plaster and metal clattered around them, one chunk striking Jacob's shoulder with a hard thud. Pain radiated through his torso, but he gritted his teeth, staying protectively over the children until the immediate danger subsided. When the dust settled enough to see, he could make out that the corridor was half blocked by fallen debris. The emergency exit sign was visible on the other side of the wreckage, glowing dimly through the haze. He helped the children to their feet, ignoring the searing ache in his arm. "We just have to get across," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. They wove through a gap in the debris, stepping over broken ceiling tiles and twisted metal rods, Sparks flew from a damaged light fixture, sizzling angrily. Jacob felt a rush of adrenaline that fueled each step, his focus entirely on getting the kids to safety. At last, they reached the heavy metal door with the glowing red exit sign above it. Jacob used his uninjured arm to push it open, the door creaking in protest. Fresh air, damp with a hint of drizzling rain, greeted them. Sirens wailed in the distance. The mall's loading dock area was behind the door, a wide concrete space that opened onto the parking lot. Outside, red and blue lights flashed as emergency vehicles converged, paramedics running toward the building with stretchers and oxygen tanks. Mall security personnel were directing frightened shoppers away from the doors. Jacob propelled Ava and the little girl forward, heart hammering as they joined the throng of evacuees. The little girl burst into fresh sobs, her gaze darting frantically around the chaotic scene, searching for familiar faces. Jacob knelt beside her again, trying to speak despite his own trembling breath. "We're safe now. We'll find your parents. It's okay." A security guard approached, noticing the terrified child. "Is she yours?" he asked Jacob, shouting over the din. Jacob shook his head. "She got separated from her parents. Can you help her, please?" The guard nodded, reaching out a sympathetic hand to the little girl. Another official joined them, asking for the child's name. She stammered it out, along with her parents' names. Jacob took a step back, relief washing over him, though his shoulder throbbed with pain. A wave of paramedics descended, offering to check them for injuries. Jacob gently refused, pointing at Ava first. "Check her. She's my daughter." He winced, feeling the ache intensify, but he wanted to ensure Ava was all right. The paramedics wrapped Ava in a blanket, checking her vitals and making sure her lungs were clear. She insisted she was fine, her eyes darting nervously to her father. Meanwhile, the child Jacob had rescued was ushered toward a group of medics who offered her water and tried to calm her. Jacob exhaled a shaky breath, grateful that the girl was finally in professional hands. Before the paramedics could turn their attention to Jacob, he heard the voices of frantic adults shouting for their daughter. Two well-dressed individuals drenched from the rain pushed through the gathering near the ambulances. Their faces were etched with dread. As soon as the girl spotted them, she broke into a sobbing run, throwing her arms around her mother's waist. The father bent down, enveloping the pair in a desperate embrace, tears shining in his eyes. Jacob felt a surge of relief that was quickly tempered by exhaustion. The girl pointed in Jacob's direction, seeming to explain who had helped her. The parents looked up, scanning the crowd. Jacob, feeling an odd mixture of embarrassment and not wanting any fuss, took Ava's hand. He tried to slip away quietly, weaving through the mass of evacuees. He managed to escape the radius of the paramedics, ignoring their calls for him to wait for a medical evaluation. Spotting an opening in the crowd, he steered Ava out of the immediate chaos, desperate for quiet and for a chance to regroup. Out in the parking lot, flames licked at a section of the mall's exterior, though firefighters were already blasting it with high-powered hoses. Thick plumes of smoke roiled upward, swirling into the overcast sky. The acrid stench made Jacob cough, tears pricking his eyes. He shielded Ava from the worst of it, guiding her toward the far edge of the lot where fewer people had gathered. Ambulances and police cars lined the perimeter, flashing lights reflected on the wet asphalt. Journalists and camera crews had started to arrive, jostling with microphones and cameras, capturing the unfolding emergency for the news. Jacob knew that if he stuck around, he might be interviewed, or at least singled out for helping the little girl. He had no desire to be recognized or questioned, especially with an injury throbbing in his shoulder and 1,000 other worries swirling in his mind. He just wanted to be sure Ava was safe, then return home. They had no car, so they would have to navigate the city buses or wait for the roads to clear. He was not even sure if the buses were running near this section after such a major incident. For now, though, the only thing that mattered was getting away from the pandemonium. They walked, shoulders hunched against the drizzle, circling wide around fire trucks and frantic shoppers. Police officers were setting up barriers, redirecting traffic. Bystanders were clustered in small knots, some crying, some talking rapidly on phones. Jacob's thoughts were disjointed, a swirl of relief that they were alive, and terror at the close call. Ava clung to his hand, her eyes downcast. "Daddy, are we okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He squeezed her hand gently. "We're okay," he said, his tone strained by pain. "We're alive, honey." He tried a reassuring smile, though it came off weak. "That little girl is safe too." Ava gave a slight nod. "I was so scared, Dad." Her voice cracked, tears pooling in her eyes. "You got hurt. I saw that thing fall on your shoulder." Jacob winced at the reminder the wave of pain was intensifying now that the adrenaline was fading. "I'll get it checked soon, promise. We just need to get home." He scanned the street. They were near a bus stop that, hopefully, was still operational. With a grimace, he led Ava onward, ignoring the throbbing in his arm. 10 minutes later, they were finally on a crowded bus that had been rerouted to bypass the mall's main entrance. Other evacuees were on board as well, some in shock, some describing the chaos to loved ones via phone calls. Jacob slumped into a seat, Ava beside him. He stared at his reflection in the bus window-soaked hair, ashen face, the faint twitch of pain around his eyes. Yet there was a flicker of relief that overshadowed everything else, that they had escaped, that he had been able to help a terrified child. He cringed at the idea of how much worse it could have been. When they finally stepped off the bus several blocks from their apartment, Jacob realized that every muscle in his body felt like it had been wrung out. The drizzle had eased, leaving the pavement shiny under the street lamps. Ava was silent as they climbed the worn stairs to their unit on the 3rd floor. Jacob fumbled for his keys, chest still tight from the lingering smoke in his lungs. Inside, the apartment was cold. He flicked on the overhead light, which buzzed for a moment before casting a dim glow. "Go change, sweetheart," he said quietly, removing his damp jacket. Ava nodded, heading to the bathroom. Jacob stood by the sink, leaning heavily on the counter. He rotated his injured shoulder gently, testing the range of motion. A sharp pain told him he should probably see a doctor, but the idea of a hospital bill made his stomach clench. Maybe if the pain worsened, he told himself, he would go to the clinic. For now, though, he could not afford it. The memory of the mail from the landlord demanding overdue rent made that clear. He decided to settle Ava, check on her, then try to sleep off the pain and see if it improved by morning. Night had fallen by the time they finished changing into dry clothes. Ava curled up on the couch, hugging a small stuffed bear that had once belonged to her mother. The shock of the day's events lingered in her eyes, but she tried to be brave. Jacob sat beside her, drawing a thin blanket over both of them. He quietly apologized that there was not enough money for a hot meal tonight, and she nodded, saying she was not hungry anyway. They sat in silence, the weight of the day pressing down on them. Despite the swelling ache in his shoulder, Jacob felt a strange sense of calm in his chest. They were alive. Nothing else mattered more. He drifted into an uneasy sleep, haunted by flashes of that crumbling mall corridor, the terrified child's screams, and the possibility that he could have lost Ava. He woke intermittently through the night, hissing as he shifted his shoulder. Ava remained curled next to him, her quiet presence a source of comfort. Eventually, dawn arrived, sending pale light through the cracked blinds. Jacob rose, feeling every protest from his muscles. Ava stirred, blinking blearily. She asked him how his shoulder felt, and he managed to downplay the pain. He told her to get ready for school. She was attending a public middle school nearby, her academic performance one of Jacob's points of pride. She deserved a stable environment, yet here she was, living in borderline poverty. He felt the gnaw of shame but tried to mask it. He would walk her to school, then figure out how to get through another day. Perhaps he would stop by a local community health clinic and see if he could get a quick check for his shoulder at a reduced cost. He escorted Ava down the sagging steps, giving her a quick hug before she headed into the schoolyard. As she disappeared inside, he clenched and unclenched his hand, feeling the dull throb of bruises from where he had shielded both children in the mall. He considered going directly to the clinic, but a flyer on a telephone pole advertising day labor at a construction site caught his attention. The text promised same-day pay, though it also required heavy lifting. Jacob almost scoffed at the idea, but the need for money overshadowed his pain. He scribbled down the address. Maybe they would not notice his injury if he was careful, or maybe the job would be something he could manage despite his sore shoulder. As he made his way there, weaving through the city's mid-morning traffic, he saw glimpses of the local newspaper headlines in the stands. "Mall explosion leaves dozens injured," read one. Another paper's front page read, "Heroic rescue caught on camera. Man shields child amid chaos." Jacob winced, feeling a twinge of anxiety. Could that be him? The mall had security cameras, and the local news outlets always jumped on stories of heroism. He hoped the footage was not clear, or at least that his face was not easy to identify. He had no interest in being on the news. The last thing he wanted was any sensational coverage that might draw attention to his impoverished situation or drag him into a media storm. He arrived at the address for the construction job, only to find a long line of men waiting for the foreman to choose who he needed that day. The foreman was a burly figure in a reflective vest, strolling along the line, pointing at men who looked physically strong or who he recognized from previous jobs. Jacob stood toward the back, his injured shoulder stiff. By the time the foreman reached him, the slots were filled. The man gave a curt apology, telling Jacob to come back another day. Disappointment stirred in Jacob, but he simply nodded and moved aside, pressing a hand to his shoulder. Perhaps it was for the best. He was in no shape for heavy lifting anyway. Frustrated, he left and decided it was time to check out the community clinic. The building was a drab brown structure with a sign that read, "Free clinic. Donations appreciated." Inside, the waiting room was cramped with a handful of people who looked equally down on their luck. A harried nurse took his information and told him to wait. It was almost 2 hours before he was called back to an exam room, where an overworked physician's assistant hurried through a checkup, prodding at Jacob's shoulder and asking questions about the incident. She recommended an X-ray, though the clinic did not have the equipment on site, and strongly urged him to visit the hospital if the pain persisted. Jacob sighed, explaining he lacked insurance. The PA frowned, handed him a prescription for some mild painkillers, and said it was the best she could do. Leaving the clinic, Jacob realized it was midday already. He had only a few dollars left in his pocket, enough to buy a cheap sandwich or a bus ride. He swallowed his pride, deciding to skip lunch and use the money for bus fare home. Maybe he could scrape something together in the apartment's pantry for a modest dinner with Ava. He mulled over the possibility of returning to the mall area to see if any of the businesses needed cleanup help after the explosion. But that felt like a long shot. The scene was probably still crawling with emergency personnel and investigators. When he got off the bus near his building, he trudged up the steps, head bowed. Thoughts of the terrifying incident at the mall played on a loop in his mind, especially the image of that little girl's fearful eyes. He tried to focus on the positive, that she was safe. Perhaps her parents found her, took her home, comforted her. He was just another face in the crowd. Now, though he had played a crucial role in her rescue, he doubted they would ever cross paths again. He opened the apartment door to find a piece of paper slipped under it. He feared it might be an eviction notice, but it was only a notification from the building manager reminding tenants of the upcoming pest control visit. Jacob tossed it aside, sighing in relief that it was not an eviction notice, at least not yet. His shoulder twinged again, and he decided to take one of the pain pills, gulping it down with a glass of tap water. The entire day felt like an uphill battle, and it was not even over. He sank onto the couch, rubbing his temples, resolving to wait until Ava returned from school so they could at least have some quiet time together. As evening approached, Ava burst in, dropping her backpack by the door and greeting him with a hug. She noticed his grimace at the sudden contact with his shoulder. "Dad, does it still hurt a lot?" she asked, concerned. He tried to reassure her, claiming it was just a bruise, but she saw through his attempt. Yet she did not press, understanding the precariousness of their finances. They ate a modest dinner of pasta and canned sauce that Jacob scraped together, each lost in private thoughts about the previous day's ordeal. Over the next couple of days, the city buzzed about the mall explosion. Footage of the incident looped on local news channels, with anchors describing the hero who threw himself over 2 children to protect them from debris. But the man's face in the video was partially obscured by smoke and a falling ceiling tile. so the newscasters referred to him simply as the unknown savior. Jacob felt relieved whenever he saw glimpses of the coverage. None of the video clips clearly showed his face. Interviews with eyewitnesses praised the bravery of an unidentified father who was seen guiding not only his own child, but also another little girl to safety before disappearing into the crowd. The little girl's parents, according to the news reports, were searching for the man who saved their daughter, urging anyone with information to come forward. They declined to reveal their identities, but they spoke through their attorneys or representatives, saying they wanted to personally thank him and offer a token of gratitude. Jacob watched these news bites with a conflicted heart. A small part of him wondered if he should step forward and accept any reward, which might help him pay rent or fix his battered finances. But he felt an even greater reluctance. He did not want the spotlight or the questions about how he ended up so poor, about Ava's circumstances, about why he was in the thrift store. He dreaded the possibility that Child Protective Services might get involved if they saw the state of their home. Most of all, Jacob feared the pitying stares that might follow them if the public realized the hero was just another struggling single dad at the edge of poverty. So he remained silent, going about his days with as much normalcy as possible. Ava returned to school, her classmates occasionally asking if she had been at the mall when the explosion happened. She admitted she had, but said very little else, not wanting to draw attention. Jacob spent his afternoons looking for work, sometimes getting a few hours of day labor, sometimes returning empty-handed. He told himself it was the right decision, that a quiet life, even one filled with hardship, was better than having the city's gaze turned upon him. But fate had other ideas. Late one afternoon, a sleek black luxury sedan eased onto the cracked pavement of Jacob's Street. Its tinted windows reflected the bleak buildings and graffiti-strewn walls. At first, nobody took notice of it. Cars occasionally passed through this rundown part of town, though seldom of such obvious wealth. The sedan came to a halt in front of Jacob's apartment building. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, checking an address on a small slip of paper. He had a resolute expression, as though he had finally arrived at the end of a long search. Inside the apartment, Jacob was attempting to fix a leaky faucet in the bathroom. He was hunched under the sink, fiddling with old pipes and cursing quietly, when a hesitant knock sounded at the door. Ava, who had been reading on the couch, hopped up to answer it. Jacob heard her muffled greeting, followed by a confused hesitation. "Dad," she called. "There's someone here to see you." He grunted, stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, and headed to the front door. As soon as he saw the man in the hallway, Jacob's stomach dropped. The visitor was well-groomed, with short, carefully styled hair. He wore an expensive-looking suit, the kind that spoke of corporate offices and high-salaried positions. His expression, however, was warm, if a bit uncertain. Behind him stood another figure, a stern-faced woman dressed in professional attire, maybe an assistant or bodyguard. "Jacob Blair?" the man asked softly, glancing between Jacob and Ava. Jacob swallowed. Yes? He could not imagine who this man was or how he had found them. A flicker of alarm coursed through him, half expecting some legal trouble or a debt collector, but the man's next words took him by surprise. "My name is Gabriel Sterling," he said quietly. "I believe he saved my daughter's life at the mall a few days ago." Jacob's eyes widened, his mind reeling. This was the father of the little girl he had shielded. But how had he tracked Jacob here? He cast a quick glance at Ava, who looked equally startled. Forcing a breath, Jacob said, I'm not sure She was alone, and I just helped her get out." Anyone would have. Gabriel's expression softened. But it wasn't just anyone who would risk themselves to shield a child from falling debris. "We've been looking for you since that day. Mall security and some third-party investigators helped us. We saw images from the cameras and followed leads. It took some time, but a few witnesses recalled seeing you leave with your daughter, described your clothes, and security footage from outside showed what bus you boarded. We tracked that route, hoping we might find someone who recognized you. And here we are." Jacob felt a flush of embarrassment wash over him. The tenacity of this man's search was impressive, if somewhat unsettling. He cleared his throat. "Well, I'm glad she's okay." That's all that matters. Gabriel nodded, stepping forward. She's more than okay, thanks to you. Her name is Sophia. She hasn't stopped talking about the kind man who helped her when she was so scared. He paused, looking at the dingy hallway and the chipped paint on the apartment door. A subtle flicker of emotion crossed his features, as though he realized just how difficult life might be for Jacob. I wanted to thank you in person, he continued, his voice sincere. I owe you a debt I can never truly repay. Jacob opened his mouth to reply, but found himself momentarily speechless. He had not expected gratitude of this magnitude. He had expected maybe a handshake, some heartfelt words, and that would be it. Instead, the man before him had the bearing of someone accustomed to wealth and power. Jacob could see from the subtle glint of Gabriel's watch, from the polished shoes, from the confidence in his posture, that he was not an ordinary father. The name Gabriel Sterling struck a chord in Jacob's memory. Something about a tech mogul, a name that occasionally popped up in business news stories about breakthroughs in software or philanthropic work. Could that be the same man standing in front of him now? Ava tugged gently at her father's sleeve, and he realized they were still just standing in the doorway. Clearing his throat, Jacob stepped aside. Would you like to come in? I'm sorry, it's a bit cramped. Gabriel's assistant cast an uncertain glance into the small apartment, but Gabriel nodded. Thank you. They stepped inside, the assistant carefully watching her surroundings, as though scanning for any potential threat. The living space was modest faded wallpaper, second-hand furniture, a flickering overhead light. Gabriel's expression remained courteous, but Jacob could sense he was taking in every detail. Ava offered them the single chair at the small dining table, then went to sit on the couch, which doubled as Jacob's bed. I'm sorry it took so long to locate you, Gabriel began again, folding his hands together. We wanted to respect your privacy, but I had to find you. Sophia wanted to meet the man who saved her. He paused, looking around. She's waiting in the car. I can introduce you later, if that's all right. Jacob nodded dumbly. Of course. I didn't think I'm not used to much attention. I understand, Gabriel said gently, sensing Jacob's discomfort. If you prefer, we can go somewhere more private. He glanced at the assistant, who stepped forward. We've arranged a place for you to speak if you wish, she said, her voice calm but professional. Or we can remain here, though it might be less comfortable. Jacob bristled slightly, worried that they were judging his living conditions, but he pushed the insecurity aside. I guess somewhere else might be better, he admitted softly, aware that the neighbors might eavesdrop or interrupt. But, my daughter Ava, I don't want to leave her here alone. Gabriel's face broke into a small smile. Of course, she should come, if that's what you'd like. Ava looked at Jacob, unsure. He nodded at her. Let's go meet Sophia properly, he said quietly. Just let me get my jacket. He glanced at Gabriel. Though I'm really not dressed for anything fancy. Gabriel waved a dismissive hand, as though the notion of formality was irrelevant. No need to worry about that. I'm not here to judge your wardrobe. Despite his words, Jacob noticed the brand of Gabriel's suit jacket likely more expensive than half a year's rent. The man caught Jacob's brief hesitation and added, I appreciate you agreeing to speak with me. I promise I have no intention of making this uncomfortable. Jacob sighed, guiding Ava to the door. He was not sure if it was wise to go off with a complete stranger, even one as apparently wealthy as Gabriel Sterling. But something about the man's earnest expression, and the fact that he was the father of the girl Jacob had saved, gave him confidence this was not a con or trap. Plus, a small part of Jacob was curious about what might come of this meeting. Perhaps there was a chance for some short-term help to ease their financial burden, though his pride prickled at the idea of accepting charity. They made their way down the creaking stairs and out onto the street, where the sleek black sedan gleamed. Jacob noted the driver, wearing a dark suit, standing by the rear door. Inside, he could see a child's silhouette leaning against the window. As soon as they approached, the little girl's face brightened. She flung open the car door and practically leaped out, ignoring the driver's alarmed, "Miss Sterling!" It was Sophia the child from the mall, the one Jacob had shielded. She wore a neat dress, with small ruffles at the sleeves, her hair carefully combed and tied back with ribbons. Her eyes shone with excitement and relief when she recognized him. "You're the man who helped me at the mall," she breathed, seeming awestruck. Jacob felt an odd lurch in his chest at the sight of her safe and healthy, so different from the terrified girl in the smoke-filled corridor. He gave a small nod. "I'm glad to see you're all right." Sophia glanced at Ava, a shy curiosity in her gaze. Then, before anyone could say more, she took a step toward Jacob. "Thank you," she whispered, her lower lip quivering slightly. "I was so scared. And you helped me. You didn't even know me." A wave of emotion rushed through Jacob. He bent down to her level. "Anyone would have," he began, but she shook her head vigorously. "No," she said firmly. "They didn't. People were running, and I couldn't find Mommy or Daddy. You stopped. You saved me." Jacob's mouth went dry, unsure what to say. Ava watched from the side, a faint smile on her lips. She recognized that the little girl was speaking from the heart. Sophia's mother, who must have been inside the car as well, emerged now. She was elegantly dressed, her expression one of deep gratitude. She greeted Jacob warmly, shaking his hand with both of hers, tears glinting in her eyes. She then turned to Ava, quietly thanking her too, though Ava insisted she had done nothing heroic. Gabriel cleared his throat, motioning to the driver. "Let's get somewhere more comfortable. I have a reserved space in a nearby establishment, where we can talk privately." Jacob exchanged a look with Ava, who shrugged. With a sense of hesitant trust, they climbed into the sedan. Sophia insisted on sitting next to Ava, chattering softly, while Jacob found himself seated beside Gabriel, who directed the driver to a quiet restaurant. The interior of the sedan smelled of polished leather and faint cologne, worlds apart from the musty odor of the city bus. Jacob felt a knot of tension in his stomach. He stared at the passing buildings outside, trying to piece together how this might unfold. Gabriel seemed to sense his anxiety. "I know this might be overwhelming," he said gently, leaning closer so that only Jacob could hear him over the hum of the engine. "But please know, my wife and I simply want to extend our gratitude. You saved our child. If there's anything you need or want, we want to help." Jacob glanced down at his scuffed shoes. I'm not looking for a reward. I promise. I just did what anyone would do." Gabriel reached out, clasping Jacob's uninjured shoulder lightly. "I believe you, but let me do something. Anything. I owe you my daughter's life." Jacob had no immediate reply, his emotions tangled. On one hand, a more practical part of him screamed that this was the opportunity of a lifetime. He was broke, behind on rent, struggling to provide for Ava. A single offer of assistance from a billionaire might solve all his problems. Yet pride and shame tugged at him, reminding him that he did not want to appear as if he had saved Sophia merely to gain money or favors. The rest of the drive passed in awkward silence, punctuated only by Sophia's soft chatter with Ava in the back. After a short journey, the car pulled up to a discreet entrance of a high-end restaurant that Jacob had never so much as dared to set foot in. A valet hurried to open the doors, and the group filed out. Inside, they were shown to a private dining room. Rich mahogany paneling, soft lighting, and plush chairs surrounded a large table. Jacob felt out of place, conscious of his worn attire. Ava, for her part, looked wide-eyed at the luxury, and Jacob gently put a hand on her back, as if to steady her. Gabriel spoke to the maitre d', who nodded and whisked away to retrieve menus and refreshments. When they were all seated, with Sophia close to her mother, Gabriel turned to Jacob again. "Let's relax. Please, order anything you want." He nodded toward Ava. "You too, dear. Anything. Consider this my family's treat." Ava looked to Jacob for guidance. He cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Just some water, thanks," he murmured. Ava politely echoed him, though Jacob could tell she was tempted by the array of possibilities. Gabriel frowned gently. "Please, I insist. If you don't want a big meal, at least something simple. You both look like you haven't had a proper meal in a while." Jacob bristled slightly at the remark, but he understood it was said without malice. In the end, he agreed to let the staff bring out a few light dishes. Sophia, still brimming with gratitude, asked Ava if she liked spaghetti or mac and cheese. The two girls ended up sharing a small plate of fancy mac and cheese that was a world apart from the boxed variety Ava knew. Jacob and Gabriel ate more sparingly. Jacob's nerves were too frayed for him to enjoy the meal, but he recognized it tasted exquisite. The conversation was tentative at first. Gabriel's wife, Elena, quietly told the story from Sophia's perspective. How the explosion rocked the mall, how the crowd stampeded, how her daughter was too frightened to move until a man with a gentle voice stepped in and shielded her with his body. Jacob relived the memory as she spoke, wincing at the recollection of the debris that struck his shoulder. He flexed his arm, feeling a dull ache. Finally, Gabriel broached the subject of gratitude. Jacob, I need to do something for you. My daughter is everything to me. If something had happened to her, I can't even bear to think about it. His voice trembled with genuine emotion, and Elena placed a comforting hand on his arm. You don't have to do anything, Jacob said in a low tone, his gaze fixed on the white tablecloth. It was the right thing to do. Gabriel's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in determination. Yes, and that's exactly why I must do something. We can start small. Perhaps you'd let me pay any medical bills you might have from your injuries? Jacob tensed. I haven't been to the hospital. I can't afford it. I went to a free clinic, but they only gave me some painkillers. It's nothing major. Elena's voice was gentle, but insistent. Let us help you get proper care. At least allow an X-ray or an MRI, if necessary. Jacob's pride faltered in the face of their genuine concern. He exhaled slowly, nodding. All right. If it'll make you feel better, I'll let you pay for that. Gabriel's face lit with relief. Of course. And please, if there's more, for instance, your living situation. I understand from the footage we gathered that your apartment might be Jacob's back stiffened, an embarrassed flush creeping up his neck. We manage, he said tersely. Gabriel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I know it's none of my business, but if you'd let me help, maybe a better place, maybe help you find a stable job, so you don't have to worry about next month's rent. It's not charity, Jacob. I consider it a moral debt I owe you. Jacob felt the weight of Gabriel's words. He glanced at Ava, who was engrossed in a quiet chat with Sophia about their favorite cartoon shows. The idea of a better home for her, maybe a safe neighborhood with decent schools, overcame his pride for a moment. He swallowed thickly, tears threatening to well in his eyes. I don't want to be a burden, or look like I'm exploiting this situation. Elena offered a kind smile. We know you're not exploiting anything. We're offering because we're grateful. Jacob forced himself to meet Gabriel's gaze. I've been looking for a decent job for months. My skill set is mostly in auto repair, mechanical work. The shop I worked at shut down. He paused. If you could help me find something stable, maybe that'd be a start. Then I can pay my own bills. Gabriel nodded, seeming to appreciate Jacob's stance. I can do that. My companies often have positions that might fit your skill set. Or I could reach out to my contacts. And while you get on your feet, let me put you and Ava in a nicer place. You can pay me back when you're settled, if you insist. Whoa. Jacob almost laughed at the notion that a man as wealthy as Gabriel Sterling would even notice repayment for rent. But the sincerity in Gabriel's eyes told him that the man wanted to help in a way that respected Jacob's dignity. With a trembling sigh, Jacob nodded. All right, but only until I'm stable. I want to make it on my own eventually. A look of profound relief washed over Gabriel's face, and Elena exhaled as though a weight had been lifted. Thank you for letting us help. You'll see it'll be a fresh start, she said softly, her tone full of promise. Ava and Sophia interrupted then, with the little girl tugging her father's sleeve to whisper that she wanted to give Ava a present. Gabriel smiled, taking out his phone and tapping a quick message to someone. He explained to Jacob that they had set aside a small gesture for Ava, but it was more than a gesture. Sophia wanted to give her something to remember their friendship, which she felt was forged in those few moments of shared danger. Jacob started to object that it was too much, but then realized it was important to Sophia, who was brimming with gratitude. He decided not to refuse, out of kindness to the child's feelings. As they finished the meal, conversation grew lighter. Ava and Sophia seemed to connect easily, their initial shyness giving way to giggles and whispered anecdotes about their favorite online shows. The grown-ups spoke in more detail about the next steps. Gabriel's personal driver would pick up Jacob and Ava the next day to visit a medical facility for a proper scan of Jacob's shoulder. Then they would look at some potential apartments. Jacob felt a surreal sense of disbelief, as though he had stumbled into a fairy tale. Part of him worried that this was too good to be true, that he might wake up back in the drafty apartment with nothing changed. But the sincerity in Gabriel's voice and the warmth in Elena's smile quelled some of those fears. After paying the bill, which Jacob did not even see, but suspected was astronomically high, Gabriel led them out. In the parking lot, a second black sedan had arrived, driven by another employee. "We arranged this so we can drop you off without displacing my wife and Sophia," Gabriel explained. "I'll ride with you so we can continue talking, if that's all right." Jacob nodded, grateful for the ride back to his building. Ava and Sophia exchanged reluctant goodbyes, with Sophia urging her father to let her see Ava again soon. Gabriel promised they would arrange a time for the girls to meet. Inside the second sedan, the hum of the road filled the silence for a moment. Jacob let out a long, shaky breath, feeling both anticipation and dread for what lay ahead. Gabriel studied him, then spoke softly. "Tomorrow is the start of a new path for you, Jacob. I promise I won't trample your independence or dignity, but let me do this. You saved my child. Let me save you from the hardship you're enduring." Jacob simply nodded. Words felt insufficient to express the storm of gratitude, apprehension, and relief battling inside him. Soon, they arrived at his rundown building, and the contrast between the battered exterior and the sleek vehicle was stark. Gabriel stepped out with Jacob, shaking his hand firmly. "I'll have my driver here at 9 in the morning. We'll go to the doctor first." Jacob offered a tentative smile. "All right, thank you." Gabriel just nodded. "Thank you," he replied, a hint of moisture in his eyes. With that, he climbed back into the sedan, and it pulled away from the curb, leaving Jacob and Ava standing on the crumbling sidewalk in stunned silence. The pair walked upstairs, each lost in thought. Once inside, Ava began to bubble over with excitement. "Dad, can you believe it? We might get a new apartment. Maybe we won't have leaky faucets anymore. Maybe I can finally get my own room again." Jacob tried to contain his own disbelief. He ruffled Ava's hair gently, though it pulled a smile to his face. "Let's not get too carried away," he murmured, but his eyes shone with a spark of hope. "Let's see what tomorrow brings." The night stretched with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Jacob found himself unable to sleep soundly, the throbbing in his shoulder combining with the swirl of what-ifs in his mind. Could this truly be a new beginning, or would something go wrong? He replayed the moment he protected Sophia in the mall, never imagining that act would have such far-reaching consequences. And he thought of Ava's face, how she lit up at the possibility of leaving this dingy apartment. For her sake, he told himself, he would seize this chance, no matter how uncomfortable his pride felt. Morning came slowly. Jacob was awake before dawn, pacing around the apartment, tidying what little they had, as though wanting to present a better face when Gabriel's driver arrived. Ava stirred and dressed, practically bouncing on her toes with a level of optimism that Jacob had not seen in her for a long time. At exactly 9, as promised, the black car pulled up. They went downstairs, Jacob wincing at every jolt on his injured shoulder. The driver greeted them politely, then whisked them away toward a private medical facility across town. The building was sleek, the reception area lined with polished floors and large windows letting in natural light. Jacob felt out of place in his scuffed shoes, but the receptionist treated them courteously, explaining that everything had been taken care of. Gabriel was already waiting in the lobby, clad in a crisp shirt and slacks. He shook Jacob's hand, greeted Ava warmly, then guided them to the radiology section. A series of X-rays and scans revealed a hairline fracture in Jacob's shoulder blade, along with significant bruising. The doctor explained it would heal without surgery, but recommended rest and a proper sling. Jacob felt grateful to have an actual answer. He might never have gotten this if Gabriel had not stepped in. Afterwards, they headed to an upscale downtown area, where, with the help of a real estate agent Gabriel had arranged, they viewed a series of furnished apartments. Jacob's discomfort grew as they were shown stylish lofts and spacious condos that felt too posh, the kind with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. He gravitated toward more modest places, but even the basic options in this neighborhood far exceeded anything he could have afforded. Eventually, with some coaxing from Ava's starry-eyed wonder, he settled on a 2-bedroom unit in a newer building. It was not the largest, but it was clean and modern, with a small balcony that overlooked a neat courtyard. The real estate agent explained that it was available for immediate move-in. Jacob tried to stammer a protest about the cost, but Gabriel reassured him that the arrangements had already been handled. Jacob could pay back what he wanted, whenever he was able. For now, the place was theirs. Standing in that bright living room, hearing Ava squeal at the sight of a bedroom that would be just hers, Jacob felt a lump in his throat. He turned to Gabriel, who was leaning against the door frame, smiling at the scene. "Why are you doing all this?" Jacob whispered, his voice strained with emotion. Gabriel's gaze flickered over to Ava, who was testing the bed. "I meant what I said. You saved my daughter's life. As a father, I owe you a debt that cannot be measured in dollars. Let me give your daughter a safe, comfortable home, at least." Jacob swallowed hard. "Thank you," he managed, tears threatening to spill. Gabriel gave his shoulder a gentle pat careful of the sling the doctor had insisted Jacob wear. "No need to thank me. You've already done more for my family than you realize." By nightfall, Jacob was signing the last of the temporary lease documents. Ava was so overjoyed that she did not even seem tired, though her bedtime approached. A local moving service Gabriel had arranged delivered a modest amount of furniture and home essentials. Jacob realized he and Ava owned almost nothing beyond clothes and a few personal items. The emptiness of their old apartment had been so normal for them that they did not see how bare it was until confronted with this new space, which Gabriel had insisted on outfitting with basics. At one point, the real estate agent offered them new sheets, blankets, and small kitchen appliances, explaining that Gabriel's personal shopper had purchased them for the place. Jacob felt a deep gratitude bordering on disbelief. Could everything really change so swiftly? He watched Ava settle onto her new bed that night, tucking her in with fresh linens, noticing how she drifted off with a blissful smile. He lingered in her doorway, tears in his eyes, remembering the cramped corner she used to sleep in. Then he walked into the small living room, lowering himself carefully onto the couch, mindful of his sling. The city lights blinked through the window. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of genuine hope. In the days that followed, Jacob's life took a direction he never imagined. Gabriel introduced him to the director of a tech company he partly owned, who agreed to place Jacob in a trainee program for mechanical and technical support. He would help repair specialized machinery used in the production of the company's hardware. Though Jacob was not versed in high-tech components, his background in mechanical work made him a quick study. For the first time in ages, he had a reliable paycheck, not day labor wages that vanished by the following week. He arrived each day in his sling, still healing, yet determined to prove his worth. His supervisors were impressed by his dedication and problem-solving skills. Word reached Gabriel, who congratulated him with a warm handshake. The sense of dignity Jacob felt at finally earning honest pay again was indescribable. Meanwhile, Ava adapted to their new environment. Gabriel and Elena paid for her to transfer to a better public school in a nearby district. At first, she worried about fitting in, but quickly found new friends, excited by the well-resourced classrooms and caring teachers. She visited Sophia occasionally, forging a real friendship rather than just the bond of trauma from the mall. They talked about normal kid things, games, music, after-school activities. On weekends, sometimes the two families met for lunch. Jacob's discomfort around such wealth persisted, but Gabriel made every effort to put him at ease, treating him like an equal who had saved his daughter rather than a charity case. Jacob's shoulder healed steadily. The initial scans, covered by Gabriel, led to follow-up visits that ensured a proper recovery. With the specialized brace the doctors gave him, he could function almost normally, albeit with some pain. At work, his colleagues respected his focus, even assisting him with heavier tasks so he would not risk re-injury. At home, Ava thrived, delighted by the little things like a fully stocked fridge, and the novelty of turning on a faucet without it leaking. Some nights, Jacob would find himself gazing around in amazement, wondering how everything had changed in the span of mere weeks. Yet, along with the blessings, came an undercurrent of fear. Jacob worried about what would happen if he failed at this new job. He worried about how he could possibly repay the Sterlings for their generosity. He knew Gabriel had waived the rent for now, but how long would that last before Jacob insisted on contributing? Late one evening, he summoned the courage to bring it up with Gabriel after the two families had finished dinner together. They sat in the living room of Jacob's new apartment, the children playing a board game at the dining table, while Elena was chatting quietly on her phone. Jacob cleared his throat. "Gabriel, I need to talk about something." Gabriel set down his coffee cup, tilting his head in polite curiosity. "Of course." Jacob met his gaze, forcing the words out. "I'm doing better now. I have a job. My shoulder's healing. I can't keep letting you cover my rent indefinitely. I appreciate everything, more than I can say, but I have to stand on my own feet soon." A gentle smile curved Gabriel's lips. "I was wondering when you'd bring that up. I know your pride would eventually make you want to handle things yourself." He folded his hands together. "I'm not offended, Jacob. I respect it. How about this? Get settled in your job, give it a few months to save some money, and when you feel you can handle it, start paying. There's no rush. We can write up a fair lease or mortgage plan." Jacob exhaled, relief and gratitude mixing in his chest. "Thank you. I don't want you to think I'm using you." Gabriel shook his head firmly. "Never. You're like family now, truly, and we'll be connected for life, in the sense that you saved my precious child. Money is the least I can offer." Jacob nodded, emotion tugging at his throat. He risked a glance at Ava, who was laughing with Sophia over some inside joke. The sight sent a warmth through his chest. This was the closest thing to peace and security he had felt since losing his wife. For the first time since the tragedy, he sensed a future that held promise and stability for Ava. "Speaking of that," Gabriel continued, lowering his voice slightly so the girls would not overhear, "I want to do something else that might seem extravagant. I'd like to put aside a college fund for Ava. She's bright, she'll go far, and I want to ensure she has every opportunity." Jacob's eyes widened. His first impulse was to refuse, but the weight of responsibility for Ava's future made him pause. The idea of a guaranteed college education for her was a dream he had hardly dared to contemplate. "That's unbelievably generous," he managed to say, voice thick. I don't know." Gabriel placed a reassuring hand on Jacob's arm. "You can. And you will. Let me handle it. She'll never have to worry about not affording an education. She's a wonderful kid, Jacob. Think of it as an investment in a bright mind." Jacob wiped away a tear, nodding. "Thank you," he said, overcome with emotion. "I'll never be able to repay you fully." Gabriel's smile was solemn. "You already have. My daughter is alive because of you." Their conversation ended when the girls announced that Sophia needed to head home. A car would pick them up shortly. Elena rejoined them, hugging Ava goodbye and expressing how glad she was to see them all thriving. In the hallway, as the Sterlings left, Elena touched Jacob's shoulder. "I know this is a lot, but we're here for you. I hope you know that." He nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. He watched them go, his heart full. When Ava came to his side, he put an arm around her shoulders. She pressed close, content and secure. "You okay, Dad?" she asked softly, noticing the tears that lingered in the corners of his eyes. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Yes, kiddo. Just happy." As weeks turned into months, Jacob settled into a rhythm. He woke early, took Ava to school, then commuted to the tech facility, where he learned the nuances of mechanical systems he had never dreamed of tinkering with. He earned enough to buy groceries, clothes, and other necessities without panic. He even set aside a small sum each paycheck, determined to begin repaying Gabriel. Meanwhile, his bond with the Sterlings deepened. They remained respectful of his privacy, never intruding unannounced, but they often invited him and Ava over for dinner or an outing, forging a genuine friendship rather than a relationship defined by charity. The memory of the mall explosion sometimes haunted Jacob. He would wake at night, heart pounding, recalling the thunderous blast and swirling smoke. But in those moments, he would remind himself that he and Ava were safe, that the little girl he saved was thriving, and that, out of that terrifying event, a new life had emerged for both families. It was not an overstatement to say that his single act of courage had changed everything. One day, after a successful day at work, Jacob arrived home to find Ava buzzing with excitement. She practically dragged him to the living room, pointing at the small TV that Gabriel had gifted them. The local news was on, running a feature on the mall explosion hero, recapping the events that had transpired months ago. Footage showed the chaos, the falling debris, and a blurred figure huddled protectively over two children. The reporter narrated, though the hero's identity remains unknown to the public, sources say he has been privately thanked by the family of the child he saved. Our station's attempts to uncover his story have not been successful, but eyewitnesses continue to express their admiration for the bravery shown that day. Ava looked at her father, eyes shining. "That's you, Dad. You're the hero," she whispered, an undercurrent of pride coloring her voice. Jacob watched the screen, noticing how the footage, while dramatic, never revealed his face. It was mostly the back of his head, smoke swirling everywhere. He felt a pang of gratitude that the press never fully identified him, sparing him unwanted attention. He turned to Ava, smiling softly. "I'm just a dad who did what he needed to," he replied, hugging her close. She smiled back, nestling into his embrace. "And I'm proud of you," she said simply. A quiet peace settled over Jacob as he sat with Ava that evening, reflecting on how drastically their lives had improved. He remembered the days of rummaging for spare change, of sleepless nights, worrying if they would be evicted, of the debilitating shame that accompanied poverty. Now, though they were not wealthy, they had stability, a real chance for Ava to flourish. In his heart, he thanked every twist of fate that had led him to cross paths with Sophia that day, though it had happened under such frightening circumstances. The following week, at Gabriel's invitation, Jacob and Ava visited the Sterling family's estate for a small birthday, celebration Sophia's 8th birthday. The estate was vast and elegant, surrounded by manicured lawns, a curved driveway that seemed to go on forever, and a fountain at the center. Jacob marveled at the scale of it all, feeling once again like an outsider. But as soon as they stepped inside, Sophia dashed over, hugging Ava, then Jacob, as though greeting close relatives. Elena ushered them toward a lively party, where a small group of family friends had gathered. Jacob felt a bit self-conscious among the elegantly dressed guests, but the Sterlings made sure he and Ava felt welcome. There was laughter, music, and a lavish table of refreshments. Ava gravitated toward Sophia, giggling about the decorations. Jacob wandered over to Gabriel, who was chatting with a few business associates. One of them recognized Jacob from stories Gabriel had told. They shook Jacob's hand, praising his bravery. Conversation flowed, but at one point, Jacob grew momentarily overwhelmed by the crowd. He slipped away to a quieter corner of the garden, taking a breath, letting the scents of roses and freshly cut grass soothe him. Gabriel, noticing his absence, came looking for him. He found Jacob near a garden bench, gazing at the elaborate flower arrangements. "All right?" Gabriel asked, a note of concern in his tone. Jacob nodded. "Yeah. Just it's a lot sometimes. I come from a very different world." Gabriel sat beside him, the muted strains of music drifting from inside the house. "I understand," he said softly. "You've been thrown into a new situation, but I hope you know you've earned every bit of happiness you and Ava have now." Jacob gave a small, rueful smile. "I can't help feeling like I'm living someone else's life." Gabriel clasped his hands together, glancing at the sky. "You're living your own life, one you reshaped by being brave and selfless. Never doubt that." He turned to face Jacob, sincerity shining in his eyes. "I have no doubt you would have saved Sophia even if you knew nothing would come of it. That's the kind of man you are. But because of that act, my family gained not just our daughter's safety, but also a treasured friend." Jacob swallowed, touched by the words. He was about to respond when Elena called them from the patio, announcing they were about to cut the birthday cake. The men rose, exchanging a companionable nod. Together, they They joined the group around Sophia, who blew out the candles with gleeful excitement. Ava stood next to her, both girls sporting wide smiles, their friendship blossoming despite the contrasts in their backgrounds. As the cake was served, Jacob looked around at the myriad of joyful faces. He caught Ava's eye, and she smiled in a way that told him she was truly happy. The music, the chatter, and the warmth of camaraderie settled around them. Jacob felt that he was exactly where he belonged, not as a charity case, but as a man who had chosen to protect a child in a moment of crisis, forging a bond that transcended wealth or status. In the months to come, Jacob grew more confident at work, learning intricacies of machinery he once never dreamed of touching. His supervisor praised his ability to troubleshoot complex issues. He formed friendships with coworkers who admired his work ethic. Outside of work, he attended night classes sponsored by the tech company, aiming to improve his technical knowledge further. Ava excelled in her new school, joining a science club and making new friends. Occasionally, father and daughter would return to the old neighborhood to see if any acquaintances needed help, and Jacob felt a pang of gratitude that he no longer had to worry about day-to-day survival. Gabriel and Elena continued to be a supportive presence, but they never smothered Jacob with their generosity. Instead, they gently guided him to stand on his own, offering help when needed, but recognizing his desire for autonomy. The families grew closer, sharing holidays and small gatherings. Sophia referred to Jacob jokingly as her hero friend, which never failed to make him blush. Ava thrived on having more social opportunities, growing in confidence and exploring her interests. Through it all, the memory of the mall explosion lingered in the background of Jacob's thoughts, a reminder that tragedy had been the catalyst for unimaginable blessings. He often reflected on how life's twists could be so unexpectedly transformative. A day that began with him searching for second-hand shoes for his daughter ended with him saving a billionaire's child, an act that forever changed the trajectory of their lives. One evening, well over a year since the mall incident, Jacob sat on the balcony of the apartment, now comfortably his own. He had insisted on taking over the rent, and although Gabriel had agreed, he kept it at a very modest amount. Ava had gone to bed after finishing her homework, which included advanced math problems that Jacob could not have dreamed she would tackle this early in her education. The city lights glimmered before him, and a gentle breeze carried the sounds of distant traffic. Leaning back in his chair, Jacob thought about how far they had come. He was healthy, employed, and able to provide Ava with a stable home. She had her own room, a desk to do her homework, and a little music player that she adored. Every so often, a pang of sadness for his late wife would strike him, wishing she could see how beautifully Ava was growing up. But in the next breath, he felt a wave of gratitude that he was still here, able to watch his daughter blossom, able to be the father she deserved. A few days after that introspective moment, Jacob received a call from Gabriel. "Can you and Ava join us at the orphanage fundraiser next Saturday?" Gabriel asked. "It's something Elena and I are sponsoring, and Sophia's excited to go. She wants Ava there too. I think it would be nice to show your support if you can." Jacob agreed readily, seeing it as an opportunity to give back to the community in a meaningful way. On the designated evening, he and Ava arrived at a large event hall, filled with booths and donation tables. People dressed in semi-formal attire mingled, sampling hors d'oeuvres while learning about the orphanage's programs. Jacob had never attended such a function, but he recognized the same desire to help that burned in his own heart. As they strolled around, he noticed Gabriel and Elena greeting guests, skillfully rallying donations. The Sterlings waved them over, introducing them to some local dignitaries. Jacob was initially uneasy at being in the spotlight, but as he met some of the orphans who stood by a booth, showing their artwork, he felt an immediate connection. He spoke with them, encouraging them about their talents, praising their sketches and little sculptures. Some recognized him from the mall explosion hero news stories, though few knew his face well enough to place him on sight. He answered their curious questions with gentle humility. Ava struck up a conversation with a shy girl who explained she wanted to be an engineer someday. Remembering her father's mechanical passions and the new life he had embarked on, Ava excitedly told the girl that it was absolutely possible. Jacob watched his daughter's encouragement with pride. He thought about how adversity had shaped them both, but also pushed them toward compassion. He realized that whether wealthy or struggling, each person had the power to change someone else's life with kindness. The event concluded with a short ceremony. Gabriel delivered a speech about how every child deserved love and a chance at success, no matter their background. Elena spoke eloquently about the difference that one caring action could make in a child's life. They gestured to Jacob and Ava, referencing them indirectly as an example of how life could shift dramatically due to compassion and courage. The crowd applauded, and Jacob felt his cheeks warm. He managed a nod in acknowledgement, though he still preferred anonymity to public praise. By the end of the evening, enough money had been raised to significantly boost the orphanage's resources. As they prepared to leave, Jacob and Gabriel shared a quiet moment. Gabriel placed a hand on Jacob's good shoulder. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to me that you're here, helping others when you can." Jacob gave a soft, genuine smile. "We're doing what we can. I figured, if I've been given so much, I should pay it forward." Gabriel nodded, beaming. "You understand exactly what this is all about." In the car ride home, Ava dozed off, lulled by the motion of the vehicle and the day's excitement. Jacob gazed at her sleeping form, recalling the time when their world seemed dark and hopeless, a cramped apartment their only refuge. He remembered the cost of bus fare weighing heavily, the dread of each month's rent, the swirl of fear as a sudden explosion tore through the mall. Now, the future looked brighter than ever. He had a stable job, a home, and a circle of caring people around him. He had faced tragedy and found a path to renewal. In the days that followed, life settled back into its gentle routine. Jacob thrived in his position at the tech company, eventually graduating from trainee to a full-time mechanical technician. He won the respect of his peers, who appreciated his quiet humility and reliable craftsmanship. Ava joined an after-school science club, a testament to her growing interest in problem-solving. The Sterlings remained in close touch, with Sophia and Ava forming a bond akin to cousins, if not sisters. One evening, as Jacob was organizing some documents, he stumbled upon a news clipping from the Mall Explosion, a physical copy he had tucked away. It showed a blurred photo of the unknown man shielding two kids. The headline read, "Unsung Hero Saves Lives in Mall Disaster." Jacob stared at the image, remembering the chaos and terror of that day. He touched his shoulder, feeling the faint tenderness where the fracture had once been. A swirl of gratitude rose in him, gratitude for having survived, for being able to protect a child in need, and for the extraordinary turn of events that followed. He resolved to keep this clipping as a reminder that even in life's darkest moments, the power of compassion could spark profound change. He closed the folder, setting it on a shelf. Then he stepped into Ava's room, where she sat working on a project, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up, smiling when she saw him. "Everything okay, Dad?" He ruffled her hair playfully. "Better than okay. Just thinking how lucky we are." She grinned, eyes shining with understanding. "Yeah, we are." She hesitated, as though mulling something over, then added softly, "I'm proud of you, Dad. You saved that girl, and you saved us too." Jacob's throat tightened. He leaned over to give her a gentle hug. "I did what I had to do," he whispered, "for her and for you." With that, he tucked a stray lock of her hair behind her ear, marveling at how much she had grown, how strong and resilient she was. He left her to her project, stepping into the living room to reflect on the improbable journey that had brought them here. From a father searching for second-hand shoes in a rundown mall, to a father who had the resources to give his daughter not just a roof, but a promising future, that arc left Jacob astounded at how swiftly life could pivot. And it all started with an explosion, a moment when he did not hesitate to shield a frightened child. Now, the nightmares of that day had turned into hope, purpose, and a sense of belonging he never thought possible. In the weeks and years ahead, Jacob would continue to work hard, earn his living, and give Ava the security she deserved. Their bond with the Sterlings would deepen, anchored by that fateful day's event. Gabriel's promise of a college fund for Ava became reality, enabling her to dream beyond limitations. and the orchard of mutual support they had cultivated bore fruit in every aspect of their lives. Friendship, community involvement, and a profound appreciation for the simple grace of everyday existence. Though Jacob often downplayed his heroism to Sophia and the Sterlings, he would always be the brave man who saved their cherished daughter. To Ava, he was both father and role model, showing her that courage and kindness could bring light even to the darkest situation. And to himself, Jacob knew he had forged a path that merged humble compassion with newfound opportunity. The single act of shielding a lost little girl had shattered the walls that once confined him, opening a door to a world in which generosity replaced despair and perseverance replaced resignation. He never forgot that day in the mall: the deafening blast, the swirl of smoke, the high-pitched alarm, and the frightened sobs of a child separated from her parents. The memory remained etched into his mind, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of each choice we make in moments of crisis. Yet in that life-defining choice, Jacob found not only salvation for a little